My name is Chantel from Kalamazoo, Michigan. We've come to Lesson 3, Monuments of His Grace. Our memory verse is found in Joshua chapter 4, verses 23 and 24, and it states, "For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan for you until you passed over, as the Lord your God did it to the Red Sea, which he dried up for us until we passed over, so that all the peoples of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God forever." God bless you.
The crossing of the Jordan was not simply a historical event, it represented a transition that deeply marked Israel's identity as God's people. Just as the passage through the Red Sea signified liberation from slavery, the crossing of the Jordan signified the beginning of a new stage, the transition from being wanderers to becoming a settled nation in the Promised Land. Both events not only demonstrate God's power but also His desire to guide His people through every vital transition. The Psalms and other Old Testament texts reflect how these experiences were understood not merely as historical memories but as spiritual symbols pointing to greater transformations. In Psalm chapter 114, for example, both crossings are linked to illustrate God's greatness in changing His people's condition, from oppression to freedom, from insecurity to well-being. Thus, yesterday's miracles become today's spiritual lessons, for God continues to lead His children beyond the Jordan of their difficulties toward new beginnings. When we look at Christ, we find that He Himself passed through the Jordan in His baptism, inaugurating His redemptive ministry and prefiguring His people's entrance into a greater rest. In this sense, the Jordan becomes a symbol of the spiritual transition into the abundant life that Christ offers. Welcome, my name is Augusto Palacios and this is Studying the Lesson. Thursday, October 16th, Beyond the Jordan. Psalm chapter 66 verse 6 connects the crossing of the Red Sea and the Jordan with the believer's personal experience. The author does not merely recall an ancient event but celebrates it as a present reality. He turned the sea into dry land. This association teaches us that God's mighty acts are not confined to the past but echo continually in the lives of those who trust Him. Every deliverance experienced by Israel points to the deliverances God continues to work in our personal stories. Psalm chapter 114 deepens this symbolism by showing how the elements of nature, the sea, the river, the mountains, respond to the Lord's presence. Here, the crossings are not just historical episodes but signs that creation itself submits to the God who guides His people. Israel moved from slavery to freedom and from wandering to stability, but behind each transition stood the same active presence of God. Likewise, our spiritual transitions are not the result of chance but of the hand of the one who rules over all. The crossing of the Jordan, like the Red Sea, carries theological weight, pointing to the transformation of God's people's identity. To cross the river meant leaving behind the uncertainty of the wilderness and entering the land of promise. This was not only a physical change but a spiritual one. Israel was to learn to live as a holy nation, faithful to the covenant. In our Christian walk, the Jordan symbolizes those decisive moments when God calls us to leave the old behind and step into the new, trusting that He will do the impossible. The story of Elijah and Elisha in 2 Kings chapter 2 revisits this symbolism. Elijah crosses the Jordan before being taken up to heaven, and Elisha crosses it again to begin his prophetic ministry. The Jordan then marks the end of one stage and the beginning of another, showing that every transition under God's will carries a divine purpose. Just as Elisha took Elijah's mantle, we too are called to take up the spiritual legacy God has entrusted to us and move forward. In the New Testament, this symbolism reaches its climax in Jesus' baptism in the Jordan. There, the Son of God identifies with sinful humanity and consecrates Himself to the mission of salvation. The Jordan ceases to be merely a geographical river and becomes the setting for divine revelation. "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased," Matthew chapter 3 verse 17. Thus, the Jordan announces that in Christ the promise of a new beginning for all humanity is fulfilled. Hebrews chapter 3 and 4 invite us to see in the crossing of the Jordan a figure of the rest of grace. Entering Canaan prefigured the rest that Christ offers to those who believe in him. This is not merely physical rest but the spiritual peace that comes from trusting in God's promises. Just as Israel had to cross the Jordan to dwell in the land, we too must cross the Jordan of faith to enter into the fullness of divine grace. This symbolism challenges us today to ask, what Jordan are we called to cross? It may be abandoning habits that bind us, facing fears that paralyze us, or making decisions that draw us closer to God's will. Every time we respond in faith, God opens a way where there seemed to be none, confirming that he remains the God of wonders. Finally, the crossing of the Jordan reminds us that the story of salvation does not end in the promised land but points to its eternal fulfillment in the New Jerusalem. There, God's people will experience ultimate rest and live forever in his presence. The Jordan thus becomes a symbol of hope. Just as Israel entered Canaan, we too will enter the eternal kingdom through the redeeming work of Christ. Be part of the conversation on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and X. Sunday to Friday we share 2 daily questions at 2 p.m. and 8 p.m. an opportunity to reflect, learn together, and enrich our study.